Hey Wargamers, today Games Workshop released a new set of updated FAQ and errata for the core rulebook, but also for the various indices that we have. So I want to talk about some general things that we learned from that, but also specifically look at how it's changed the way that Tau play, because there's a couple really big changes that deserve some attention. So before we do that, though, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button and the subscribe button. Also hit that little notification bell, that way you don't miss any of my upcoming 8th edition year reviews, battle reports, other stuff like this. Cool. So let's get started. Basically, with the general FAQ for the core rulebook, the biggest change is something that really speaks to the way the meta has been shifting. If you've been paying attention to how some of the big tournaments have been going, how prominent flyers are in the meta right now, you'll not be surprised that Games Workshop has tweaked the rule set to basically prevent that from happening. So previously, like this big bad wolf of lists has been Bobby G, Rabute Gilliman, and a bunch of Stormravens or something more or less like that. And that's been really hard to counter. Games Workshop has said that for match play, flyers don't count for the number of units that you actually have on the table in terms of tabling. So if you were to face the Bobby G and co list, you really would just have to kill Rabute Gilliman, and then you would win the game, because flyers don't count as units in terms of occupying the table. So once you killed Bobby G, there wouldn't be any units left on the table, and your opponent would win, or you would win if you killed Bobby G. So that's pretty big. That means that we're not going to see this list in competitive settings anymore. Basically, it's just a non-starter now. If you only have to kill one model to win the game, then you're not going to bring that list. So that's good in some ways. It makes things a little bit more diverse. Promotes more diverse lists than just Stormraven spam or whatever. But it also, you know, adds a little bit of rigidity to the army construction, which is one of the things that we've really liked about 8th edition so far. So I think it's 99% positive, but you know, that 1% negative is still there. So that's the biggest thing. Really, you're not going to see that list anymore. But other changes, they made some clarifications as far as melee weapons. They said, yes, for sure, everybody has a melee weapon, and it has this, you know, basic profile, which is strength as user, no AP, that type of thing. And that's important because things like advanced targeting systems for Tau are going to modify that AP. So that means that crisis suits, for example, if they have an advanced targeting system, are going to hit at a -1 AP in close combat. So that's an important clarification that they made. It was, you know, pretty obvious from previous FAQ and from the way that they worded it before, but I think they really just solidified that understanding in this new FAQ and said, for sure, this is how it's supposed to be interpreted, which is good. They also clarified that units that break up into multiple units after deployment, so things like crisis suits with drones or a lot of artillery, things like that, for purposes of deployment, they do count as one unit. And so that in a sense, relative to Tau, that's important because it speaks to how they're deployed for Manta Strike, whether or not they're able to use homing beacons or not. And again, this says, yes, that's not a problem. And that's the way I've interpreted it. And I think most people have interpreted it is that that's how it's supposed to work. But again, they're clarifying that to avoid confusion, which is nice. And they also addressed if psychic powers count as redeployment, or if they basically count as re-deep striking. And they said that, yes, if you use some sort of psychic ability like Gate of Infinity and move across the board, it basically counts as being redeployed via deep strike or reserves or whatever. And that's important because it triggers some interactions with other rules, like early warning override, for example. So for Tau, we can fire at units that redeploy or are deployed mid-game using early warning override. Using Gate of Infinity now officially triggers that response. So if someone were to Gate of Infinity right up to you, you could use your early warning override and give them a good shooting at right off the bat. No more ambiguity on that, so that's good. And another major change or clarification that they made, which I think is particularly important for Tau dealing with ethereals, shield drones, which we'll talk about in a minute, and stimulant injectors, is that if you have some sort of ability that allows you to roll a d6 after taking a wound and ignore that wound potentially based on that roll, you can do that multiple times. So the example for Tau would be if you have a stimulant injector that allows you to roll a d6, and on a 6 you can ignore the wound. And if you're also benefiting from Sense of Stone from an ethereal, you are able to roll that again. So there's no one roll limit on this type of mechanic, which is nice. It basically means that if you have a stimulant injector and an ethereal, you have the equivalent of a 5-up Feel No Pain instead of just a 6-up. So they do stack. You can use them multiple times. So that's really nice. And along those lines, when we look at the Tau specific FAQ, we got another major change to the way that drones work. Specifically, shield drones had basically been nullified in the last FAQ. They changed savior protocols to circumvent the invulnerable save of shield drones previously, and so there was basically no point in taking shield drones. But with this newest FAQ, they've changed it so that shield drones essentially have a 5-up Feel No Pain, which is really good. It's good for a couple reasons. One is that you can use it even when taking a mortal wound, so you don't have to worry about having a shield drone die just because you're taking a mortal wound. And I think that actually makes shield drones much more valuable now than they were originally even. So we can actually see shield drones playing an important role in accompanying crisis suits or riptides or broadsides. I can actually see shield drones being really useful there. Another important change is something that just kind of blows my mind that wasn't in the rulebook to begin with, but you know, lots of things kind of slipped their way into these indexes right off the bat, and that is that interceptor drones on the Sunshark have 2 ion rifles, not just 1. So that makes the Sunshark a little bit better, that it actually has 4 ion rifles on it instead of 2. So again, pushing the Sunshark even better in comparison to the Strike Fighter. So Sunshark, that's a win for them. Broadsides can take more drones. That's good. And then a couple big buffs and a nerf kind of round out the Tau FAQ. Let's start with the nerf just to get it out of the way. We'll rip it off like a band-aid. Nerf is that velocity trackers only affect the model that has it. Previously, the way velocity tracker was worded, it suggested that the unit only needed to have 1 velocity tracker in it in order to benefit the entire unit. It was a per unit phrasing. Now it's been changed to per model, so indeed if you wanted to have a unit of broadsides, for example, with the benefits of velocity trackers, each one needs to take that velocity tracker. You can't have a unit of 3 broadsides and give only one of them the velocity tracker. They would all need to take it in order to get the full benefit of it. So that's a nerf. But the 2 buffs are, they're pretty good. The first is that marker lights are essentially what we would call networked marker lights before. They benefit the unit that is providing them. So if you have a unit of 5 Pathfinders, for example, you want to go through that unit marker light by marker light. You want to shoot 1 marker light at a time. So you have your 5 guys, you shoot the first one, you hit, that gives you the benefit of the the reroll 1s for the remaining 4. So if you keep doing that, you could potentially get the full benefit of marker lights right off the bat, and that cascade happens within the unit. You don't have to, use a Fireblade to, just get that +1 so that the rest of your Pathfinders do better. You actually are able to build off of marker lights within the same unit, which is really good. That's a great component to have in this army list. So that's a buff. It's not a huge buff, it's not a game changer, but it does help, so that's good. And then the other one is they changed some wording on long strike, and these are a buff, but they're also a little bit of a clarification, because the way that long strike's Firecast Exemplar rule was worded was pretty ambiguous. And this is something I actually overlooked in my original review of long strike, is that the way that it's worded actually specifically states that the Firecast Exemplar rule applies to hammerhead tanks or hammerhead gunships. And it's not bolded, it's not treated as a keyword, it specifically calls out that unit. So I was wrong in my original review to say that he benefited from that rule. He doesn't, at least he didn't before. But now they've changed Firecast Exemplar to just say that it affects other Tau Sept hammerheads, and use the bold font to indicate that it's a keyword. They've also changed long strike to have the keyword hammerhead. So this is good for a couple reasons. One is that it allows long strike to benefit from the rule, which technically he didn't before. It also allows the rule to apply to Forge World hammerheads, because they didn't actually have the same unit entry or the same unit title as standard hammerheads did. So it makes long strike much more valuable in that way. Now it does specify Tau Sept hammerheads, so you couldn't use it on a Farsight hammerhead, for example, or a Viewer Law hammerhead, for example. It has to be a Tau Sept, so that does build in some rigidity into your list, but overall it's an improvement for the way that that rule functions, and it makes it more easily understood, which is important. So overall, I think these are some really good changes to the way the game functions fundamentally, and also some pretty good improvements for the way that Tau function as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you excited about these? Are you pretty underwhelmed? Like I said, I'm pretty excited, so it's a good thing in my books. But thanks for watching, and happy wargaming.